Hello and welcome to my book review for Endless Love by Scott Spencer. This is an adult fiction novel, kind of contemporary, kind of lit fic, about a teenage boy who is madly in love with his girlfriend until one day he is banned from his girlfriend's house, from interacting with her, from dating her, from talking to her for a period of 30 days. David, the main character, doesn't take this banishment well and winds up devising a plan in which he sets fire to his girlfriend's house and then comes in at the last minute to save the day and be welcomed back into the home. This does not go according to plan. It goes about as bad as could be imagined, as he is setting his ex-girlfriend's house on fire, and he winds up being sent to a psychiatric facility. The book follows essentially the 10 years after that, as he is dealing with being psychiatrically hospitalized against his will for a long period of time, stalking this family, becoming an adult, etc., etc. I gave this book 3 stars. There were things I really enjoyed about it. I had very high expectations going in. I saw the movie about 10 years ago, and the movie is wildly different. Like, just an entirely different story, which I was fully aware of going in. But this is a completely different book. The movie's mediocre. The book is too, kind of, but in a very different way. But I'd been wanting to pick this up for a very long time because I heard how different it was, and I heard it was much more about this very obsessive man, his very toxic relationships, and I was very excited to read that. I will say, as far as strengths of this book go, the perspective of David is done absolutely wonderfully. I loved reading from him because the whole book is told from his point of view. You're getting his thoughts, his experiences, his perception of these situations, his borderline delusions, like all the messed up things he thinks and does, and all of his justifications for them, and I loved it. Like, he is an awful person. Like, in every, like, he sets fire to his girlfriend's house, and that is like the beginning of this. That's where we start, and it basically goes downhill from there. He has no redeeming qualities, and I really enjoyed just reading from his perspective. It was so twisted, it was so interesting. It was like the driving force of the book is really reading about this twisted dude and all his twisted thoughts and like his weird creepy obsession with this girl, and I really enjoyed that. One thing I like in books like this is when the main characters, who are just like these awful delusional human beings, rationalize themselves so well that it's like, as a reader, you occasionally like almost get tricked into thinking something's normal. It's like he punches his mother and then treats it as such like a normal thing. Like, he is just, it's a casual thing to him, and it's like, as a reader, you have that split second of like, you're just going along with what he's saying, and then you're like, wait, no, like, this is not actually what's happening here. Like, this is what I'm thinking and what he's thinking are two completely separate things. And it's, I really like that diversion of like, he is an entirely, his perception on the book is just entirely different than you as the reader, which I really loved it. But unfortunately, that was really the only thing that I enjoyed about this book. It was like, nothing else was really like terrible, but it kind of felt like every other aspect of this book just missed the mark and felt kind of meaningless and pointless. Like, I did love his perspective, but it was like, what were we doing with his perspective? Like, why was I reading from this super twisted dude? Like, why did I care? What was the purpose of this whole thing? And I felt like I never really got anywhere with it. Like, it takes place over 10 years, and a lot happens in those 10 years, but like, not really about anything specific. Like, it's kind of about this family that he's stalking, because it's not just the ex-girlfriend, it's both of her parents, both of her siblings. Like, he is very creepily invested in all of them, so it's about all of them, but at the same time, it's like, it's not really about any of them. It's kind of just about David, but David's not really doing anything. It's like, you're following this dude who's just kind of like doing a bunch of things, but he's not doing anything with any sort of an arc. He's not doing anything with any sort of development for him as a character or for his situation. It's just kind of all felt pointless, and I just found myself asking why a lot. Like, why am I reading this? Like, what is the purpose of this thing? And I don't feel that a lot with novels. It was just kind of unfortunate. I didn't get a whole lot of themes out of this, like relationship development, character development. Like, it all just felt so purposeless. And everyone in this is a horrible character, which I enjoy quite a bit. I really like when everyone is just like the worst, like intentionally so. They're not trying to justify this dude who goes around burning down people's houses, you know, like he is supposed to be a terrible human being, and he is. But it's not just David, it's every other character in the book is also the worst. Like, you've got the mother of his ex-girlfriend who spends her time like confessing how much she wanted to have sex with him, and how like she watched him having sex with her daughter like back in the day when they were still together the first time, and like that was creepy. And then you've got the father who's like off doing his own thing and like running around with his significantly younger new wives slash girlfriend or whatever they were. And like David's parents are very strange, kind of unsupportive people, and it's like everyone is just really, really unlikable in a whole variety of ways, and a lot of spectrums. Some people are like deluded psychopaths, kind of like David, and then some people were very much just like not great individuals. And it was really interesting. Like, everyone was very well developed. I really liked reading all of the characters. Obviously didn't like them as people, but like I enjoyed that. It was just like, what were we doing with them? You know, like what was the point? I don't know. It just comes back to this book feeling so purposeless, and like I don't feel like I got anything out of it. Like, I enjoyed the perspective, I enjoyed the people, but I just walked away like, why? Like, that was my main question for this. Like, why? What were we doing here? Because we didn't really do anything. It didn't have any sort of conclusion that mattered. Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot more needed to be done with this book. Like, it was a really cool idea, really cool point of view, and like characterization. Not so cool anything else. So that was why it got 3 stars. And then the other thing I really wanted to talk about is the sex in this book. Which I normally wouldn't like devote a significant portion of my review to discussing the sex scenes, but like, number one, there were a lot. Like, there were a lot. They were very lengthy. They were very graphic, and like, I mean, they went on forever. There was one that was like 25, 30 pages long, at least. They were frequent too, just whether he was remembering sex scenes from the past or like new ones in the present, or like imagining other people's sex, like it was a lot. And it wasn't just that they were graphic, but they were written so disgustingly. Like, I gagged at one point, like literally physically gagged, and had to put the book down. Again, intentionally so. It was written in order to be vile and disgusting. Like, that was what Scott Spencer was doing here, which like I kind of like to a degree. Like, I like reading something that's just so gross it affects me in a very like physical, visceral way. Like, whenever that happens, it's like the author is doing something right, and I enjoy that. Like, I enjoy anything that makes me feel something so negative and so strong like that. Again, like, it has to be on purpose. It can't be something I'm supposed to be enjoying. But like, it was really well done. But again, like everything else in the book, it felt like it kind of just existed to exist. Like, he really wanted to write these gross graphic sex scenes, and I don't really understand why. Like, I don't get what purpose they served in this book, apart from just like existing to be gross, which like, fine, but they didn't do anything. And I felt like that about a lot of the things that happened in this book. Like, it didn't push the story forward, didn't provide any character growth or development. It didn't like do much of anything. It was just kind of like, felt like the book just like flopped there. And it was just like, I needed something more than just the perspective and the cool characters. Because again, the characters were cool, but I wasn't really invested in them as human beings. It was like, they were cool and interesting. I liked reading about them, but I didn't care. And I didn't care about anything in this book. I just everyone was so unlikable that I just needed something to push this forward, and there really wasn't anything apart from the perspective. But I don't know. I feel like if you really like that kind of twisted perspective and you really like something that's just like kind of gross and like also like a mostly realistic way, like it's not horror by any means, but it gives like some similar vibes, I feel like you could enjoy this. I'm glad I read it. I'm really glad I finally got to it. It was a letdown only because my expectations were so high, but I didn't dislike this book. It was so interesting. And like I will forgive a lot of flaws for a book that I find interesting. So it was worthwhile for me, but it's not one that I will ever go back to. And I definitely don't think I'd be reading Scott Spencer again. This was just, it was kind of an odd one. And I do think that there's an audience, but I also think that a lot of people would just really, really hate this book. So take that with what you will, but I didn't have a bad time reading this. And there was enough here that I kind of liked it. Which isn't such a ringing endorsement, but you know, it is what it is. It was a pretty decent, interesting book with a lot of flaws. Let me know down below if you've read Endless Love and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.